The mansion loomed, a hulking shadow against the desolate moor, its silhouette etched sharply against the bruised evening sky. Once a symbol of opulence and grandeur, it now stood in silent defiance of time, its windows like hollow eyes watching over the wind-swept landscape. The moor stretched endlessly, wild and untamed, as if nature itself recoiled from the mansion's presence. Wind howled through the eaves, echoing through empty halls with a mournful, almost human wail. The sound seemed to seep into the very bones of the house, rattling loose shutters and stirring forgotten memories in the corners. Dust motes danced in pale light, painting the air with ghostly luminescence. Each shaft of sunlight revealed the slow decay, the years of neglect and the stories left untold within these walls. Mac, a solitary figure, wandered through the silence, his footsteps the only sound in the vast emptiness. Every step echoed, magnified by the cavernous rooms, as if the house itself was listening, waiting. The house, inherited from a distant relative he barely remembered, was both refuge and prison. It offered shelter from the world, but also locked him away with its secrets and shadows. Its crumbling grandeur whispered of history, drawing him deeper into its labyrinth of rooms. Ornate banisters, now splintered and worn, hinted at lavish parties and laughter long since faded. But lately, the silence had become oppressive, the solitude unsettling. The emptiness was no longer peaceful, it pressed in on him, thick and suffocating. A creeping unease clung to the shadows, a sense of being watched from just beyond the edge of sight. The corners seemed darker, the air colder, as if the house resented his presence. Mac paused, his hand on the cold marble of a long-dead fireplace, feeling the chill seep into his bones. The silence was so complete he could hear his own heartbeat, quickening with every passing moment. He glanced at a faded portrait on the wall, the eyes of ancestors staring back with unreadable expressions. The flicker of a candle cast shifting shadows, making the faces seem almost alive. The house seemed to press in, its emptiness a living presence. Shadows crept along the walls, stretching and shrinking as the light changed, as if the house itself was breathing, slow, deliberate, and watchful. He could almost feel it breathing, the slow rise and fall of some unseen chest, the pulse of something ancient and restless beneath the floorboards. A shiver ran down his spine, warning him of unseen dangers lurking just out of sight. The air felt charged, heavy with anticipation, as if the house was waiting for something, or someone. He shook his head, dismissing the fear as the house settling, the wind playing tricks on his imagination. Yet the feeling lingered, stubborn and persistent. He tried to convince himself it was nothing, just the product of isolation and too many sleepless nights. But every creak, every whisper of wind seemed to carry a warning. But deep down, the house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a predator, tightening its grip on his sanity. The walls seemed to close in, the darkness growing thicker, as if the mansion itself was alive, hungry, patient, and waiting for him to let his guard down. The west wing had always been locked, a musty, forgotten corner of the house shrouded in dust and silence. For years it had been left to the shadows, its secrets sealed away behind thick walls and a heavy sense of neglect. The air there was always colder, the light dimmer, as if the very architecture conspired to keep people out. Even the bravest children avoided it, whispering stories of ghosts and lost time. Mac never ventured there, content to let it remain untouched, a relic of the past best left undisturbed. But today, something was different. An inexplicable urge, a pull he couldn't quite name, drew him down the creaking hallway. He found himself standing before a heavy oak door, its presence more imposing than he remembered, as if it had grown larger and more significant in his absence. He didn't remember ever seeing this door before. Its dark wood gleamed in the faint light, the brass doorknob polished to a shine, as if someone had recently touched it, or perhaps as if it had been waiting for him all along. The door seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, inviting and forbidding at the same time. A strange compulsion drew him closer, a need to see what lay beyond that he couldn't resist. The air around the door felt colder, almost viscous, as if he were wading through invisible fog. Each step forward made his heart pound louder in his chest, the silence pressing in on him from all sides. A faint, cloying sweetness hung in the air, tinged with the unmistakable scent of decay. It was a smell both inviting and repellent, like overripe fruit left too long in the sun. Ignoring the warnings echoing in his mind, Mac reached for the doorknob, his fingers tingling with anticipation and dread. His hand trembled as he grasped the cold metal, a jolt of static snapping between his skin and the brass. The sensation sent a shiver up his spine, but he didn't let go. He took a deep breath, steeling himself against the unknown, and slowly, deliberately, turned the handle, feeling the ancient mechanism shift beneath his grip. The door swung open with a low, mournful groan, the sound echoing down the empty hallway. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light that spilled into the darkness beyond, swirling like tiny spirits disturbed after a long, undisturbed slumber. Whatever lay beyond that threshold, Mac knew would change everything. The darkness beyond the door pulsed. A low, rhythmic sound emanated, a deep, guttural rasp that sent shivers down Mac's spine. It was the sound of something massive breathing, slow and deliberate. The house was alive, its ancient lungs drawing in air, feeding some unseen hunger. He should leave, he knew that. But something held him rooted, curiosity warring with fear. The sound grew louder, filling the hallway. It was hypnotic, pulling him in, beckoning him to step across the threshold. He felt a strange sense of homecoming, as if he'd found something he'd always sought. He knew it was madness, but he couldn't resist. He had to see what awaited in the belly of the beast. With a deep breath, he stepped across the threshold, swallowed by the house's breathing. The room was alive in a way that defied nature and sanity. The walls pulsed with a slow beat, expanding and contracting like lungs. Veins throbbed beneath the plaster, carrying a viscous, glistening fluid. The floor felt yielding, rising and falling with each breath. Overhead, the ceiling resembled a ribcage, beams flexing with the room's respiration. The air was thick, saturated with the scent of earth and something metallic. The room was an organism, a monstrous entity beyond reason. Mac stood frozen, caught between fascination and revulsion. Every instinct screamed to flee, but he remained, captive to a morbid curiosity. He touched the wall, unable to resist. The plaster was warm, soft, almost like flesh. He felt the room's pulse beneath his hand, slow and steady. A low hum vibrated through the room, echoing his own quickening heartbeat. The sound wrapped around him, pulling him deeper. He traced a pulsing vein, slick and yielding. He recoiled, stomach churning with fear and fascination. The floor pulsed with renewed vigor, the undulation more pronounced. He staggered, equilibrium thrown off by the movement. It was as if the room was aware of him, reacting to his presence. The house was alive, pulsing with a life force both terrifying and exhilarating. He was drawn back to the wall, compelled by an unseen force that seemed to pulse from deep within the crumbling plaster. Every instinct told him to turn away, to leave the decaying room behind, but something stronger, something ancient, pulled him closer, as if the house itself was calling his name in a language older than memory. Pressing his cheek to the damp, cracked surface, he closed his eyes, surrendering to the room's strange rhythm. The chill of the wall seeped into his skin, and he felt the heartbeat of the house thudding softly beneath the layers of mold and decay. It was as if the building itself was alive, breathing in time with him. Images flickered behind his eyelids, flashes of color, whispers of voices, emotions not his own. He saw fragments of forgotten lives, laughter echoing in empty halls, sorrow lingering in the shadows. The visions came in waves, overwhelming and vivid, each one more intense than the last. They swirled around him, pulling him deeper into the house's fabric. The air thickened with memories, dust motes dancing like spirits in the dim light, wrapping him in a cocoon of sensation and sound. He lost track of time, his sense of self dissolving as the boundaries between past and present blurred. The world outside faded away, replaced by the relentless presence of the house and its secrets. He was no longer just Mac, but part of something ancient and powerful. The house's memories flowed through him, filling the empty spaces inside, making him feel both infinite and impossibly small. He felt a strange sense of belonging, a completeness he'd never known. For the first time he understood the longing that had drawn him here, the need to be part of something greater, even if it was dark and unknowable. Opening his eyes, the visions bled into reality, ghostly images and sounds overlaying the room. The line between what was real and what was imagined vanished, leaving him suspended in a world of echoes and apparitions. Faces peered from the pulsing walls, their eyes filled with longing and regret. Voices whispered his name, each one layered with centuries of secrets and sorrow, urging him to listen, to remember. He realized he was no longer in control. The house's will had become his own, guiding his thoughts and actions with invisible threads. The house had him in its grip, feeding on his fear and curiosity, binding him tighter with every heartbeat. He was both prisoner and participant, forever changed by the unnatural connection he could never escape. The whispers grew louder, forming distinct voices. They spoke of forgotten histories and ancient rituals. He tried to block them out, but they seeped into his mind. His sanity slipped, reality loosening with each moment. The voices told him he was chosen, summoned for a reason. They promised great power within the house if he embraced it. He wanted to resist, but a dark part of him yearned for the power. He felt himself changing, senses sharpening. The house's pulse flowed through his veins, its energy consuming him. The room pulsed, mirroring his quickening heartbeat. The walls throbbed with intensity, veins glowing beneath the surface. The air crackled with energy, tension prickling his skin. He staggered back, hand to his chest, desperate to escape. But his limbs were heavy, movement sluggish. The floor shuddered violently, throwing him to his knees. He tried to crawl to the door, but the room was no longer passive. The walls closed in, the ceiling lowering, shadows dancing across the floor. Panic welled up, choking his breath. He screamed, but the house swallowed the sound. He scrabbled backwards, but the door was gone, sealed shut, as if it never existed. He was trapped, entombed within the living heart of the house. The room's rhythm grew frantic, no longer breathing but consuming. He felt his sanity shatter, his self dissolving into the house's presence. He was no longer Mac, but part of the monstrous entity that had consumed him. The room exhaled, a shuddering sigh echoing through the empty halls. The pulsing walls stilled, veins fading into plaster. The floor settled, solid and unmoving. The house was silent once more, its hunger sated, Mac's essence now part of its ancient heart.